Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. Have you ever gone clothes shopping at a department store, boutique, or a thrift shop? You wander around, browsing racks and displays, seeing if anything fits your taste or style. And after a few passes through the section, you finally spot a few things that really tickle your fancy. According to Cambridge Dictionary, if something tickles your fancy, it means, quote, you like it and want to have it or do it, end quote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's nice and simple. If it tickles your fancy, then it appeals to you.
It appeals to you. You like it.
Yeah. So there are other similar phrases that may pop up here, like take a fancy, as in I might take a fancy to a lovely person and ask them to go on a date with me. Or I might take a fancy to a particular color of car and insist my next vehicle will be that color. Also, strike a fancy, where strike is using the version, quote, to catch the admiration, fancy, or affection of a person, especially considered as a potential romantic partner. In passive, to be favorably impressed by, end quote. So strike, I've always thought of strike as in the kind of like hit something, to strike a blow kind of thing. But yeah, in this case, strike can also be used meaning to catch the admiration. And so that definition was brought to us by the Oxford English Dictionary. And that is the version of strike that we hear if it's used in strike your fancy. But the common word here is fancy. And fancy as a word has been around for over half a century. It has two meanings that are often used in early works, and I would first say that most of the time when we think of fancy, or at least when Dan thinks of fancy, I think of it as something that's really nice or impressive, right? And I think of like a fancy suit, meaning a suit that's really nice, that I would wear to a high-end function or something, right?
Right.
So I think of fancy in that. But these two meanings coming to us from the Oxford English Dictionary give us another take on the word fancy. Quote, capricious or arbitrary preference, individual taste, an inclination, end quote. So that one has been around since the mid-1400s, and it is the version we commonly see used with phrases like take a fancy. The next one is, quote, something that pleases or entertains, end quote. And that definition has been attested since the late 1500s and is the one we usually see in Tickle Your Fancy and also Strike Your Fancy. So I was really surprised. Not only has fancy been around for a very long time, since at least the 1400s, and then late 1500s for meaning something that pleases, entertains, in those senses. So I thought that was really interesting to see those things happen.
Yeah, I honestly, I guess like thinking about it more, I'm like, okay, probably, yeah, 1400s, I suppose makes sense, probably in some popular works that would be familiar potentially, but I might not have originally placed it there. With like at first thought, I might have just been like, oh, maybe 1800s or something.
Yeah, this was actually a little bit difficult to research because the word fancy was very prevalent in those two definitions that I just wrote or read. So when I went on to Google Books, for example, and searched for the word fancy and looked at, say, 1600s or 1700s, I mean, it shows up everywhere. It is a very common word. So I really had to focus on getting the word fancy with one of our other words, tickle or take or strike, those kinds of things.
Okay.
But the first example I could find is from a 1642 work by a Puritan preacher, Daniel Rogers. The work is titled Matrimonial Honor, or The Mutual Crown and Comfort of Godly, Loyal, and Chaste Marriage. In this passage, he is writing that we must follow the practices of Elisha, saying, quote, we must pray against the tenacity thereof, and force ourselves to handle such thoughts roughly at the door, and in no sort to give place to them, as knowing their master's feet is not far behind them. Toss not thoughts off and on about passages which tickle the fancy, and wind in deeplier into it than can be rid thereof, end quote. So this is a great example of the phrase, and I think it answers one of the common questions with Tickle Your Fancy as well. Was this phrase created as double entendre? That is, did the phrase also refer to sex or sexual interest? And I think the answer is a clear no from Daniel Rogers. I almost called him Mr. Rogers, but in my mind, that's a different person altogether. Anyway, it is highly unlikely that a Puritan preacher would quote biblical heroes while intentionally using a phrase with a dual meaning like that.
Right.
So I think it's clear that at least he did not see it as a double entendre. And we're going to see several other examples as we move forward that have no apparent sexual inferences either. Though I should say that at some point the phrase did become a double entendre. And I'm not going to be looking into when that necessarily happened, though you will see it come up as we continue through our examples. So, and I will note that, but I wasn't looking specifically for when it started becoming a sexual inference or something on top of its other meaning. So I'm just positing it was not originating with a double entendre meaning.
Okay.
Okay, so this next one is an example from Of Gardens, a Latin poem in 4 books by René Rapin. It was originally published in 1706, but the version I found was from 1718. So 1718 is the year I'm going to go with to attest this particular example. Quote, I cannot subscribe to that censure of Seneca, whom I esteem otherwise as an excellent critic, in which he tells us that Virgil's aim was not so much to instruct his countryman as to please his reader, that it was to tickle the fancy rather than inform the judgment. End quote. So I feel like that's another good example of the phrase as we are using it even still today. Here's another one. This one is by The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, and this one uses take a fancy. Quote, come then, neighbor, let us turn again and go home without him. There is a company of these crazy-headed coxcombs that when they take a fancy by the end are wiser in their own eyes than 7 men that can render reason. End quote. So this is from 1780. And the point here is that we need to leave because once these folks set their sights on something that pleases them, they're going to work themselves up as a group and make decisions that we do not want to be around for.
That's a really interesting. I feel like there was a little bit of like kind of of the day, maybe word choice in there that made it a little bit.
Oh, was it coxcombs that did it for you?
Yeah. I'm like, isn't that a flower? Did I have it?
I have no idea what a coxcomb is, actually. I probably should have looked that up, but I don't actually have any idea. So
I mean, we can tell what it's implying.
Right. Yes, definitely. Okay, well, I've just looked it up, and it now one of the definitions is a conceited dandy, a fop. Oh no. Okay. A jester's cap, so as a coxcomb, and then a strip of red cloth notched like the comb of a rooster. And then licensed jesters formerly wore in their caps. So this is from the American Heritage Dictionary, 5th edition. So interesting. But a coxcomb, yeah, I think, as Merriam-Webster says, is a jester's cap adorned with a strip of red, like you would imagine if you were imagining an old-timey jester. So there you go. Crazy-headed coxcombs, I guess.
So if they were, like in this case, then, a lot of times they would refer to groups of people by their common dress. So this could have been referring to a group of jesters or implying that a group of people were
Yeah, I think it's
jesters.
claiming that they're being jesters, which makes sense with the rest of the phrase.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's another example. This from the 1784 work, Robin Hood, or Shorewood Forest, a comic opera. It was written by Leonard McAnally, Esquire. These lines feature an interplay between 2 well-known characters, the titular Robin Hood and his pal and confidant, known to many of us as Little John. Quote, John, clear the clouds from your brow and prepare for laughter. I have a merry tale to tickle your fancy with. Robin, postpone your merriment, good John. I am in a melancholy mood and would indulge it. John, I bring something to rouse your spirits, a challenge, and there lies the gauntlet. End quote. So in this, Robin is sad, and John is bringing him news that he thinks will cheer him up, a challenge that has been made against him. So he has a merry tale to tickle your fancy with. This next one gets a lot of credit for being an early use of the phrase, though I'm not sure it deserves that particular credit. The Light of Nature Pursued by Abraham Tucker Esquire is a work that was cited in a lot of the stuff as the first time the phrase was used, but it's clearly not. The original version of this was printed in 1774, though I couldn't find any copies of the 1774 work. I did find many later copies and reprints, but even in 1774, the phrase was used in many literary works. So I think the reason it gets brought up so much is because the work has been deemed culturally important and therefore has experienced many reprints, which means it's been available in ways many works were not until the last decade. So I think it gets credit in a lot of ways because it was when you're having to search through things before the digital preservation era, we didn't have a lot of examples of the phrase. And now, as we are able to preserve a lot of these older works digitally, we're starting to see that this phrase was actually used a lot, a lot earlier than this particular piece. Now, I'm going to use two versions here. The first comes from an 1810 version. It does not include Tickle Your Fancy. However, it does include a variant, Strike Your Fancy. Quote, "He that is vain of his piety, his reason, or his public services, hangs a little higher than while he was vain of doing mischief, of follies, or trifles. To be superstitious is something of a rise above hardened insensibility. Industry, forecast, economy, generosity, courteousness is a degree of advance from idleness, giddiness, dissipation, avarice, and ill nature. The man of pleasure, who chooses discreetly such among them as are innocent, swims a span over him who is hurried to and fro by every present appetite, happening to strike strongly upon his fancy." End quote. That's all one sentence.
That is quite the sentence.
So there's an example of a variant phrase in the 1810 work. I think it is suspect that this work didn't even include the phrase, but it is possible an earlier version did. So, like I said, even if the 1774 version contained our phrase, which I cannot verify, we have already looked at several earlier works with the phrase too. But anyway, here is an 1834 version of the book that does include our phrase, covering the same concepts, but is a different passage entirely. Quote, "The evils permitted by heaven, though designed to work out some greater good, nevertheless are always grievous in some part of their operation. How much soever they may tickle the fancy at first, the wise man will see this is only a bait to temper the heedless gudgeon, and will strive to avoid them whenever he can." End quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's another version right there, and none of these have any implicit sexual nature, though one could read that into some of these works, but there doesn't appear to be any implicit stuff here, even in the mid-1800s. Here's another example of strike instead of tickle. This is from an 1858 publication of Charles Dickens's The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby. These works were a serialized release following the young Mr. Nickleby, and they were published from 1838 to 1839. They were compiled into Dickens's third novel in 1839, but I'll be reading from the earliest version I could find, and therefore verify, the 1858 version. Quote, "Kate's very natural impression was that these engaging individuals had called with the view of possessing themselves unlawfully of any portable articles that chanced to strike their fancy." End quote. That's a very Dickensian way of saying she thinks that they're going to try and rob her.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Any portable articles.
Yes. These engaging individuals with a view of possessing themselves unlawfully of any portable articles. But yes, in this case, that chance to strike their fancy is clearly about whatever catches their eye, whatever they see and think, oh, that's mine now. I want that.
Yeah.
I want it more, sir.
Exactly.
All right, so up next, we have several modern uses to cover, and we're going to get to those right after we say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our amazing patrons on Patreon, and it is 100% free to join the Bunny Trails community. So give our weekly discussions and poll questions a try. And if you love the content and want more of it, we have some paid tiers too if you have a few dollars to spare each month and want to support the show.
We have new things every weekday on the feeds. In addition to the conversation about what movies, shows, books, and podcasts everyone is enjoying, and our weekly poll questions, we also have early access to the week's podcast, all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode, and our lightly edited behind-the-scenes video featuring all of the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts that didn't make it into the podcast feed.
We've also got original digital artwork every month made by me and direct access to talk with us. No nefarious social media algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe and JGP do every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsey Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
There are too many examples of this phrase to include in the show. So I'm going to try and make them representative of the phrase's usage, and you can let us know on our Patreon which ones you would have liked to hear included instead of the ones that I mentioned. We're going to start with What Takes My Fancy, a song from the 1960 Broadway musical Wildcat. It was composed by Cy Coleman with lyrics from Carolyn Lee, and Lucille Ball plays the title character in what I think was her only Broadway role. Don Tompkins plays Sookie, her love interest, and the verse is a call and response between Wildcat and Sookie, with Wildcat singing the refrain. Quote, "Well, I'll be swacked and pickled in moonshine, you ain't such an ornery cuss. Well, I'll be piped and peddled for coal oil, you ain't such a gloomy old Gus. Well, I don't want to give you no ides, but you might not make a bad wife. Cooking grub and pinning up dites. Hold on, Grandpa, not on your life. Them what treats me girly has to find out early. In my mama's litter, I'm the independent critter. I likes to do what takes my fancy, I likes to do. When it comes to things romancy, what takes my fancy ain't the likes of you." End quote. I really enjoyed the wordplay in the song. The phrase here, "what takes my fancy," is leaning into what appeals to the character. The song is romantic in nature, but not sexual. I couldn't find any of the original Broadway recordings of Lucille Ball's version, so I'm going to link to an old video of a performance by Tony Lamond as Wildcat and Barry Crocker as Sookie from Barry Crocker's YouTube page, so you can hear the song. And then I'm going to also link to a version by Rosemary Clooney and Bing Crosby from an old radio performance on CBS. Next up is "Come On and Tickle My Fancy," a song performed by Reg Varney in the 1973 movie The Best Pair of Legs in the Business. Here's the first verse and chorus. Quote, "I've got the finest legs, that's known in vaudeville. My tights behind the footlights give the crowd a thrill. Whenever I'm appearing, the house is always packed, waiting for the moment when I start to do my act. I've got to tickle your fancy with a little song and dancy. I've got to tickle your fancy all the time, all the time." End quote.
Nice.
Yeah, so this song is clearly a double entendre.
Right.
He is singing about making the audience laugh and enjoy the show, but also hinting at other pleasures through the symbolism and imagery, like his legs, tights, and giving the crowd a thrill. Let Me Tickle Your Fancy is a 1982 album by Jermaine Jackson. It features a song of the same name featuring Devo, and it's kind of a funky pop style song. Here are some of the lyrics. Quote, "Like the sun, I rise and shine, with last night on my mind. It's so hard to concentrate, till our love we recreate. Let me tickle your fancy, let me excite your soul. Let me tickle your fancy, let me excite your soul." End quote. So this is not a double entendre. This is just single entendre. I don't think that's what that means. Anyway.
A direct entendre? I don't know.
This is only about sexual interest.
I could see that it definitely in a funny, like in a comedy as a line. Like that.
Yeah, exactly. There is a 2001 book that focuses on the sexual innuendo of this phrase, but it goes a bit too hard for the show. So if you're interested in hearing about it, join us for the bonus section in our behind the scenes episode. Those air every Friday on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. But to one that doesn't have any underlying innuendo, I found a phrase hanging out on social media. This comes from the subreddit DVD collection and was posted by user Where's Caitlin. It's an image of their large bookshelf covered in DVDs and carries the title, Anything Here Tickle Your Fancy? The image is basically of a bookshelf, two bookshelves actually, that are just completely full of DVDs and box set DVDs.
A lot of
It is
DVDs.
so many DVDs, and you can zoom in, and there are a lot of really cool things. They've got stuff like, I can see the box set of The Simpsons and South Park, but they got a lot of really cool movies in there. Some of them I recognize just by the cover art. You can only see the spine of the DVD case in most cases, but some of them are very recognizable, right? And then they've got some of those. I don't know what they're called, but those
Funko
just
Pop.
yeah, so there are several Funko Pops that are just kind of like interspersed all over the place. One of the newer version of Pennywise I can see, and then some others that I just do not recognize at all. So, and then I do see the is that the Speed Racer vehicle with the number 5 on it there?
Yeah, Mach
Yeah,
5.
yeah, cool.
Yeah, there's some cool things in there for sure. It's there are a lot of Blu-ray DVDs on this shelf if you know
Hmm.
what that means. I don't know, those are cool. No, this is a quite the collection. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, Tickle Your Fancy is a giclée on paper by Daniel Merriman. I'm going to ask Shauna to describe this artwork, but first, I took art appreciation in college, but I had no idea what a giclée was when I started researching this episode. And I know most of you probably do, but for the few like me, a giclée is a high quality, fine art print created using a specialized inkjet printer, known for its archival quality and color accuracy. So I don't have the date on this piece, but the current seller bought the painting in 2025. Also, I'm using the French pronunciation because it's a French word, but I believe it's also in English oftentimes said giclée instead, but the French pronunciation was very clear that it was giclée.
Yeah,
So,
Shikli.
yeah. Anyway, so Shauna, please describe this for us.
Okay, so there's a background of red, and there is some variance in the color. There are butterflies intermixed throughout the work. There's did they say that what the original style of art was used to create the image?
No.
Okay, so this looks like it was potentially digital or was a painting that was then photographed, then turned into a digital printing. And it has a mask of sorts that's done in what appears to be a relief image. So that would mean that it's raised. It's intended to look as though there's a carved raised piece, and that's a mask with these tendrils coming off of it in little circular swirls. And it's really cool. That looks like it's on that backdrop of red with thin red butterflies flying around throughout the mask face, which has a smile that is almost got it could be evil, could be happy, could
Right.
be it's hard to tell.
It's reminiscent of the theater masks,
Very much
the
so.
tragedy and comedy.
Yeah, the tragedy masks. So.
Yeah.
The face's eyes are closed and its features are very exaggerated, like the emotion on the face. So
Yeah, almost like a caricaturized version of the mask. So here's a little bit about the artist, Daniel Merriman. Quote, Daniel Merriman's paintings are dreams in full color. They beckon for the viewer to join a journey into the imagination, where the worlds of reality and fantasy collide in an explosion of color, shapes, and symbolism. His unique style is the product of a solid technical skills, an illustrator's precision, and a storyteller's sense of pace. Anyone with a sense of adventure and humor who enjoys exploring a work of art will find Daniel Merriman's art an excursion worth taking. In his quest for understanding, Merriam paints to show who he is and how he feels about the world. His subjects differ as much as his emotions: fear, pain, joy, fun, all rendered in striking watercolor. For Daniel Merriam, painting is a calling, the realization of decisions to bring his life and his art into one complete place. With his personal philosophy built on creativity, art has become his greatest ally. End quote. And I think that helps when you go to the Patreon to look at this piece. I think that helps really understand some of the background for this particular work. And he is a painter, so I would assume that this was a painting that was then taking, a photograph of a painting.
Yeah, and I could see this being done with watercolor and some sketch work as well. It's really impressive, detailed work.
Well, overall, I like this phrase because it uses a form of fancy that harkens to an older era. But I don't use the phrase much because I'm rarely in a situation where connotation of sexual innuendo would be appropriate. And even if I don't mean it that way, the usage today oftentimes has like a hint of sexual innuendo, whether it's intended or not. And so because of that, there's a decent chance it might be taken that way. And sometimes I think discretion is the better part of valor. Well, that's about all we have for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon, patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
It is poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons, how old is the oldest pair of shoes you currently own? JGP says, quote, showing my age here, but I still have a pair of snow boots I bought in 1990. Although, to be fair, I only wear them now when I need to shovel after a serious snowstorm when there's been tons of snow, so once or twice a year, maximum, end quote. Heather added, quote, the shoes I wear now last about a year of use, and in fact, I just replaced them. But I'm holding on to some Chucks and Doc Martens that are older, hoping to be able to wear them again one day. The Docs are oxblood red, and my Chucks collection include purple, black glitter, and a pair I customized with Peanuts characters. If I can't ever wear them again, at least I can pass them down to my nibblings when their feet are big enough, end quote.
Nice. Glitter Fluff said, quote, it's just a really cute pair of heels I bought when I was young and am now old. I think they're about 22 to 23 years old, so just barely. But I keep them because they're the most ridiculous of the shoes I wore back then. End quote. Dustin added, quote, I have some boots that are maybe 5 years old. I tend to bust through all of my shoes because I'm rough on all my clothing. I just bought some new shoes too. End quote. Like Dustin, I am traditionally hard on shoes. My day-to-day shoes last about a year normally. My dress shoes are leather, and I take good care of them. They are my oldest at about 7 years old. I have a pair of hiking boots and a pair of work boots as well that are about 6 years old, but I wear them infrequently. My Jesus sandals I bought to go with the monk costume back in like 2010, and they're still around. But since I've worn them like 4 times in 15 years, I don't think they really count. My dress shoes are Echoes, and they're 7 years old and still in good condition. So I think I'm going to settle on that as my answer. 7 years, it's my Echoes, and I wear them not every day, but frequently.
Jan says, quote, I have a pair of dress shoes that are maybe 15 years old. They've got some wear and aren't nice enough to repair, but I'll keep wearing them until they fall apart. I also have a pair of cowboy boots that are about 10 years old and in good shape because I don't have a lot of opportunities to wear them, end quote. I have a pair of tall black riding boots that are almost 2 decades old. I will not share my age when I acquired them, but they still look great and they're quite comfortable. I probably will need to get them resold at some point, but they're still doing great. Well, if you want to take part in our silly polls, head over to Patreon. We'd love to hear your take on our weekly poll questions. And it's free at patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. Until then, remember,
Words belong to their users.